9.2 Games Beat interview with Ian Hazzikostas and Sarah Wands. While much of the content in 9.2 was designed in response to player feedback, one of the design goals was to address pain points that players would traditionally run into a few months in as they begin experimenting with ults and switching mains. With class tier sets representing large power gains that players would normally need to farm several weeks to obtain, the creation catalyst system was implemented to help new characters catch up, while also allowing benefiting existing characters' ability to better micromanage their sets of gear. As if we're adding a ton of new content, but in a lot of ways it's carrying forward the philosophies that we pivoted to. In many cases in 9.1.5 in response to player feedback over the course of Shadowlands. Building a whole new ecosystem, a whole new piece of content from the ground up with those in mind. Bringing back class sets. How will players feel 2 months into the patch when they want to switch characters, or their friends are coming back and they feel like they're behind with no way to catch up on getting their set pieces? Okay, let's add a system. Sort of thing we previously patched in down the line. From the start. Oh, dude. Oh, imagine. You know, you just feel like somebody finally just like, you yelled at them for 6 years and they finally went, you're mad about something, aren't you? You're like, yes. Feel like something's bothering you. Yes, it is. That's what I've been trying to tell you. We have this creation catalyst that players will be able to unlock using currency a couple months in to target and specifically accelerate their acquisition of set pieces. Build their own sets in a deterministic, non-RNG way. Couple months in, I feel like 6 weeks. 6 weeks is fine. I think having tier set within 6 weeks is reasonable. 6 to 8 weeks is a reasonable amount of time. 12 weeks, bit too long. I want to be playing my ult way quicker than 3 months in. So yeah. I feel like couple has to mean max 8 weeks. I think 6 to 8 weeks is a reasonable time period. We've had most of our unlocks account wide, whether it's flying in the zone or access to content. In general, just trying to get ahead of what we have been hearing from players in recent years. Oh, dude, it's taken them years. It's taken years of feedback. Okay, taking those lessons to heart, building them into the content from the ground up. This is what they need to be doing. This is good. Untested raid bosses. Ian also briefly discussed the 3 final bosses of the sepulcher of the first ones, highlighting how they purposefully... Is this a TLDR of the under section? I feel like this is a TLDR. Untested on the PTR and hitting at unique elements within the jailer encounter. Something that's really fun that we haven't had a chance to do in quite a while is the final 3 bosses of the raid have never been seen in the public test realm. They've been thoroughly tested internally, but in this zone... Hope the team that tests the final 3 bosses isn't the same team that tests Feral Druid. But in this zone full of secrets and mysteries, we wanted to try to preserve some of that sense of mystery that's been so lacking in this age of data mining and broad knowledge. Players go into the last section of the raid on the 3rd week of the patch, they're going to know what awaits them. Or they're not going to know what awaits them. They'll figure it out. People will write their guides. There will be YouTube videos. That's it. Hey, what's up YouTube? It's me, it's your boy, back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about the jailer. Don't forget to smash the bell. There will be YouTube videos, that's inevitable, but on those first couple of days, it's going to be a truly novel experience. That's not something that WoW's seen in a long time. Even when people have tested it, they're always still pretty buggy. By the time I see the last 3 bosses, they're going to be more or less bug-free. It could mess with the World First race, but I think ultimately, as a World First raider, you know what you're doing going into it, and it's about creating a spectacle more than anything, and like sponsors are going to be happy no matter what. Like, this is a better show from a sponsorship point of view, I think, because whichever team reaches the last 3 bosses first is going to get a massive jump in viewers. And a player point of view, really test those analysts, make sure that they're making their money, you know what I mean? Earning their money. Beyond that, there are amazing encounters. I think Enduin could be an end boss in most other raid zones, but in this one, he's just a major boss 2/3 of the way through. The team has gone above and beyond with environmental integration on a lot of these encounters. The jailer fight in particular makes impressive use of very unique gameplay space and elements in the room. Anything more I could say would be a spoiler. Yeah, wouldn't that be hilarious? Ian's here like, yeah, these bosses are untested. You guys are going to be going in blind. So basically what's going to happen, though, is the jailer's going to be standing in a room, and then, like, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. But yeah, anyway, untested raid bosses, yeah, cool. More account-wide progression. So the core character character-based progression is power progression. That's an interesting insight. It's getting gear, just getting stronger. That central RPG experience, that's part of what we think players are often looking for when they make a new character. They've reached a plateau, they're done with their goals on one character, they want to experience the journey again with another. You're not feeling rewarded by running dungeons and getting item upgrades because you already have it all. That feels like it takes out a big piece of that repeat experience. That's a really heavy paragraph, because in many ways I agree, but I also disagree. I don't think it's power progression. I think it's character progression. Like, the core base of character progression is character progression. It's not just making your character stronger, it's making your character look cooler and appear stronger, and like all the things that come with really crafting your character in whatever that world is that you're playing that RPG in. Like, I think this statement is very heavy because it leads to things like Torghast being player power oriented rather than being for fun, and things like Porthia being player power oriented rather than being for story and interest and exploration. If you have to do some content to unlock quests in this area, or unlock access to this dungeon, or unlock the ability to fly, re-earning those things doesn't feel like a reward when we ask you to do it the second or third time. It just feels like a penalty we inflict, and that's not the rewards, not what rewards should feel like. Okay, we need to remember this interview right now, because he's saying a lot of things that if they don't carry this over into 10.0, my immediate feedback will be to return to this interview and say, hey, Ian, knock knock, do you remember saying this 1 year ago? You have big epic quest lines that go all the way through Zereth Mortis and lead to the conclusion of many of the events in Shadowlands. The fate of the jailer, the fate of the Shadowlands as a whole. Awesome quests. Once you've done them, you the player have done them. We don't want to make every character, every alt go through those experiences unless they want to replay them. That's something where we make sure the major unlocks there are account wide. Bro, it always takes the end patch, doesn't it? It just always takes the end patch, man. But we understand, and we certainly heard loud and clear from the community that if we put power that will increase your damage in a dungeon or damage in a raid behind a system, that becomes mandatory, whether that's gameplay you enjoy or not. And so having this as something that is, for hardcore power gamers, optional, but still deep in something they can take at their own pace, something we're trying to do to offer a range of options without pressuring people to play the game in a way they'd rather not. For a long time, it seems like there was a battle between this sort of min-max mentality. You wanted players to understand that they don't have to max out their characters, but it always felt like, no, people want to max, and if they don't, they feel like they're missing out. Is that the conclusion you also came to? It's one of the big lessons learned over the course of Shadowlands. It's a trend that's present across gaming in general. The metagaming, figuring out what the metagame is. A new game comes out and people want to know about their tier list for classes or characters. Heaven forbid you pick the wrong one. Shadowlands, we set out initially having some options. Some rewards that we imagine would be just for hardcore min-maxers, completionists. You want to chase adding a socket to your gear for a fraction of a % of damage, or upgrading this conduit for a fraction of a % of damage. We want to give that to people who wanted to go deep on their characters, rather than going broad and playing lots of alts. Something to work for, some reason to do it. We often hear feedback that people are upset when they run out of goals and lack the motivation to do anything. But what we found, to our initial dismay and horror to some extent, that a much broader range of players than we expected saw this 0.4% power increase that was behind something they didn't necessarily enjoy doing absolutely mandatory. And that's not the outcome we wanted. The game needs to be fun. You need to log in and look forward to the adventures you're going to have and things you'll do with your friends. The stuff you're going to explore, the goals you're going to chase. Not feel like you have a set of chores you have to accomplish before you can play the game the way you want to. As much as possible, we're pivoting away from that and trying to offer true options without power dictating game play. I mean, this is a very good point. Like, he raises a good point. Like, you shouldn't need to farm sockets on every single character, but at the same time, if everyone else is doing it, then you feel like you've got to do it, because if you don't do it, then you're just letting people down. Like, the thing is, if your spec is already like 10% less damage than the other thing, And then also the other thing has that extra 0.4% power gain. Now you're 10.4% behind, not 10%. And it's like, that shit does matter because you want to fight for like every chance you can. Borrowed power and lessons learned. From the artifact system onward, the fact that things were temporary enabled the team enabled the team to pull out all the stops with them and make them more immediately impactful, deeper, transformative of your gameplay than they ever would have been if they needed to last forever. They were all going to be these additive things for your character. Imagine having all your talents plus your full artifact weapon plus Azerite powers plus covenants. At some point it would just be complete nonsense. At the same time, we recognize that part of an RPG, part of progression is a feeling of growth, of moving forward, of gaining power, and the knowledge that you're going to leave most or all of what you've earned behind. It does diminish the sense of accomplishment and growth. These expansions often start with a feeling of loss, which isn't ideal. Rather than getting something new and exciting, you're working to replace the old exciting thing you just lost. That's all stuff we're heatedly discussing. We approach Shadowlands systems in a much more structured way that didn't have open-ended grinds to them, but still allowed for meaningful additional choice and gameplay depth. Looking back and continuing to look at Covenant abilities and the way they've transformed gameplay, those have been tremendously successful. We're already hearing players saying, hey, I hope I can keep invoking spirits forever, because I can't imagine playing a druid without this ability. That's a sign of success. The reason we're saying, hey, I hope I get to hold on to Convoke is because the spec feels absolutely dog shit without it. It's not because Convoke feels necessarily good, it's because without it, the bare bones, if you strip it away, Feral feels dog shit to play. It's slow, it's heavy, it feels like you're walking through like a swamp. You're walking through like mud, dude. That's not saying, hey, keep Convoke. That's saying, make the bare spec pop. Make it bam. I feel like he's misinterpreting that. This is that he didn't want to give Feral specific utility because they don't want people to be forced to play a different spec in order to be competitive due to utility. That's the biggest worry, is like you give feedback and then it's misinterpreted or misunderstood, and then they think that they're like, oh no, we closed the lid on that one, like we figured that one out. That's the worst, man. Like my biggest fear with Blizzard is that they're listening to the feedback and deciding that they're okay with what the situation is, and that we as a player just don't understand. That's my concern. But yeah, I mean, it's good that they're looking at borrowed power and understanding. Like, I mean, this is a pretty just general open statement. Like, this is kind of saying like, oh yeah, well, you need to progress your character, but we also understand that a lot of systems feels bad. Right, let me read this last thing and then let's continue playing. There's certainly a possibility of this cross-faction guild, still a possibility. You know better than to close the door definitively on almost anything, but we want to be guided by feedback. If we loosen restrictions and allow formation of social bonds, there's no way we can ever roll that back. Can't tell a group that's been playing together for some number of months, sorry, we decided this was a mistake, you can't do that anymore. I agree, they have to be careful with guilds. I'm fine with guilds not being cross-faction. I think that's totally fine.